Okay, hello YouTube. I'm doing a Zoom call with my father right now. We're going to talk about his time as the branch president in Moldova. Um, I just wanted to introduce my father. If you want to talk a little bit about yourself and why you were in, why are you're in overseas right now? Why are you overseas? What do you do?
Well, I am Ian's father. My name's Gary, and I am an international school teacher. And we have lived in a variety of places for the last 15 years teaching overseas.
What places have you lived in? You
Saudi
don't
Arabia,
You don't have to say your
uh,
current. You don't have to say your current one, just so
well,
people
currently
don't
I'm
like.
in Kazakhstan. Currently I'm in Kazakhstan, but we were in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. We did a year in Moldova as COVID refugee. I mean, a year in the United States rather as COVID refugees, and then we were in Moldova for 4 years, and now we're in Kazakhstan.
And how has that been for you? Is teaching fulfilling? Has it been awesome?
It's fantastic. I really enjoyed teaching overseas. Kids are kids. I mean, we experience different cultural aspects, but as far as school and the way kids are kids. Outside of Saudi Arabia, where we were in sort of a unique situation, school is school. It's about the same, just a little better when we get to live overseas. We like it. It's not for everyone.
Um. All right. So I wanted to talk about. So we wanted to. This video is focused on Moldova specifically because I feel like that was an interesting time, spiritually related at least, because this is a YouTube channel about church. So, um, so, uh, can you start? Can you just tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Moldova and what was going on that led you to that spot, and how you got called as the branch president?
Well, we actually were COVID refugees at that point. We were supposed to be teaching in a country that we couldn't actually get to, and so we were teaching asynchronous online, which allowed us to be in Utah near our family, which was great. But it was kind of a challenge teaching wise because we were just online submitting videos and assignments and things. It was very awkward. And our company, the school that we work for, decided that given the situation in that country, that they would transfer people out. And so we got a transfer option to go to Moldova, and we took that option. And so we finished out that school year online, and then the next year we were in Moldova. And so we got there just post the the pandemic. The things that just started clearing up.
So like 2021, 2022.
Yeah. And the church had been shut down and everything in Moldova, the same as lots of other places. And so it kind of similar to what's happened in other places in the world and in the US even. A lot of people stopped coming to church at that point. It was a difficult time.
And then, how I remember being kind of present for some of this process. It seemed like it was kind of sudden. Like as soon as the church found out you were going to Moldova, they were like, "Can you be the branch president?" Like immediately before you were
Well,
even there.
it was kind of that was actually kind of funny. The I'd had contact with the church about us being overseas where we were at, and so I notified them that we'd be going to Moldova, and they said, "Oh, you want to talk to Ivan Stratov?" And they just gave me this name, Ivan Stratov, and I didn't know who that was, and so I sent an email to Brother Stratov, and he sent me an email back just identifying himself as Ivan. Like he just signed his email, best of luck, Ivan. And then we heard nothing like for a long time. And I as things were getting closer, I sent another email and like nothing happened. And so I like we went months without hearing from anyone. And then about 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave to go to Moldova, I get this email from Ivan Stratov, and he was like, um, "Hey, are you coming to Moldova?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And he's like, "Oh, that's great. When are you coming?" So we send an exchange of a few emails back and forth about when we were coming and whatnot. And I still have no idea who he is because all of his emails, he just signs as like Ivan. Um, and I mean, I'm going to Moldova. There's a lot of Russian, Ukrainian people there. I figured. I mean, the name sounds very Russian or Ukrainian or something.
Keep talking over it.
Moldovan. I don't. I mean, I didn't really know. And so he says, "Well, I need to actually talk to you. Can we have a call?" And I was like, "Sure, that'd be great. Like, can you call on WhatsApp?" And he was like, "Yeah, that worked perfect." And so we set up a call, and this is now like 3 days before I'm supposed to be getting on a plane. And so he calls, and the first thing I find out is that Ivan is actually President Stratov, the mission president. So I felt very embarrassed for having called him Ivan all this time. I was like, "Oh, I'm very sorry. I didn't realize who you actually were because no one actually ever told me that." Um, and then it was very disorienting because I was expecting to hear somebody with like a Moldovan or I like which I don't even know what Moldovan was at that point, or a Russian or something. But he's Australian, and so I'm getting this Australian accent. It was very disconcerting. It's like, who are you, Ivan Stratov from Australia? But actually, his family is Ukrainian, and his parents had moved to Australia when he was either when he was very young or before he was born. And so he was born and raised in Australia, and so he speaks very Australian, but in fact has a lot of family in Ukraine. And so he was called as the mission president there, and so I'm talking to President Stratov, and this is like 3 days before I'm leaving there, and he's like asking me questions about my church experience and if I'd served a mission and where I served and if I'd served in leadership in the church. And I think he knew some of this. Um, because he had my membership information. So I mean, I don't know. But it's like, "Yeah, we'd like to call you to be the branch president." It's like, "You've never even met me." Like, this is very awkward to be called to be the branch president 3 days before I'm even in the country. And it was like, I don't speak, either Russian or Romanian. And he's like, "That's not important." And so, yeah, I got to Moldova, and within a missionary had been serving as the branch president. Their previous branch president had been unable to continue in that position, and there was no one that was able to fill that role. And so it was a missionary doing it. And so I very much um, to President Stratov, he told me that I was an answer to his prayers. So it was a bit faith promoting.
Um, so, kid, while you were there in Moldova, that is when the Ukraine war broke out, right?
Yeah, we were there for not very long. We were there for about a year before the war started. It was sort of difficult for things. The branch has only a few members, and missionaries had been a big help assistance to the branch, but the missionaries had been gone, and so the missionaries had just barely come back before we got there. And so they were kind of building that, and we were there, and only until about, I mean, yeah, like the first year before the the war broke out. So we had missionaries for about a year, and then the missionaries were pulled out again.
So the missionaries were just getting back from COVID, and
Yeah,
then
so the
they just
missionaries had come back, and they were there for about a year before then they got before the war broke. When the war broke out, all the missionaries from all the American or foreign missionaries, not Ukrainian missionaries, got sent to Moldova because Moldova is it's part of the Ukraine Kiev mission, and so they actually ended up collapsing the two missions in the Ukraine into one mission. Although they still are two different missions, one mission president runs both of them, and and Ukrainian missionaries continue to serve in the Ukraine, and foreign missionaries all are stationed in Moldova.
So when the war broke out, a lot of Americans, since Moldova, for those who don't know, Moldova is like immediately next to the Ukraine. A lot of Americans were asking me about my parents, and were like, "Are they safe over there? Did you feel in danger at any point?" Or
That's a sort of funny aspect of that. Um, Odessa is only about I don't know, it's like an hour, couple hour drive to Odessa. Um, it's really, really close. And a lot of the early war took place in Odessa with the Russia trying to take Odessa. And we could actually hear the bombing in Odessa from our house.
yeah, what'd that sound like?
Um, the explosions in the far distance, like I mean, we were aware that it was happening. It was like, what is that? And then it was like, oh, that's bombing in Odessa. That's what that is. So as bad as that sounds, we never felt threatened at all. Like there was a lot of people that would talk about, you know, Putin will come to Moldova next, but I mean, the Ukrainian forces sunk the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Um, they were winning the war in that respect. Odessa really is hard for the Russians to take, and they gave up on that prospect. And once the Russians gave up on taking Odessa, any threat of them coming to Moldova, which I always think was kind of ridiculous. Sadly, Moldova does not have a lot of resources and is not really a primary target for somebody to take over. So no, we never felt threatened.
So when you were during the war, what did the church have you guys doing as the immediate wards next to the
So
Ukraine?
yeah, that really got crazy, and there was two aspects of that. One is when the war started, um, there was a huge outpouring of support for Ukraine, and so I would have people contact me, friends, family members, people like that would just send me money. They're like, "You're helping people from Ukraine here," and they'll just send me money. And so, I had uh, I don't know how much money ultimately funneled through me. At one point, I had about $10,000 that was not my own, um, that I was using, and so with that, um, so I had my personal funds that were sent to me, and then as the branch president, I had access to additional funds to help Ukrainian people in need, and then the church got involved in other ways. And so there was a siege taking place in Mariupol, which was north of, or kind of like north along the Black Sea coast. It, before they get to Odessa, they had to take Mariupol, and so the Russians were focusing there, and they were out of food there, and so we were authorized to purchase stuff, and so we would go to this store called Metro. It's kind of like a Costco, but like the Eastern European version of Costco. And they just had tons of like bulk items. And we bought like, I don't know, 1,000 cases of canned meats, and canned fish, and just all kinds of food, all the condensed milk that they had. Um, we in a lot of cases we were getting like just all of what they had. We a ton of honey, just real basic food supplies, and um, a van. We would load up a like a Mercedes Sprinter van, and somebody would drive that over into Odessa, or like not to Odessa, but across the border towards Odessa, and they would meet up with a Ukrainian person. They would transfer the food from our van into that van, and then they would take it up to Mariupol and supply people with food there. And we did that every week for, I don't know, 6 weeks or something. We were just buying food and shipping it over there. And then we did the same. Then we sent a bunch more food to Odessa to build up stores of food there so that people there could withstand a siege in Odessa. And so the church did a lot of things like that. Um, and So my personal funds we used to support people that were fleeing from the Ukraine. We bought luggage for people. We provided transport. We rented apartments for people to stay in. Um, so all kinds of things like that. We were using our money, and then we had help from there was some Ukraine some Moldovan sisters who were married to Ukrainian men. Um, we would help them. Um, they were running aid organizations, and so we would supply them with things. And so we just kind of all worked together to figure out how best to spend our money. The church was really good about that. Anything that we could justify as a church expenditure, we would use church fast offerings funds for. So like food and things like that we could use, or medicine, we would use that way. And I had a conversation with the mission president about that. Um, and I just asked him for advice about how to spend my personal funds that I had access to, or the funds that were being donated to me versus church funds. And he said, well, save your personal funds as much as you can. Like use the church funds whenever you can, because it's like I had to go and buy um, like bulletproof vests for soldiers members who were enlisted in the war, or like drafted into the war, and they needed to provide their own bulletproof vests. And I can't use fast offering funds for that. So, it's like, oh, okay, that's that's uh that's good to know. That's a good way to think about that.
So, oh wow, that was kind of loud. So the church kind of couldn't really fund stuff like body armor and but
Yeah,
because
church is not into purchasing munitions, but we provided all kinds of food and medicine and things like that.
so and then wasn't there wasn't there kind of like a church accounting thing where they were constantly mad at you for going over budget because but the church is like asking you to do.
No, that actually had nothing to do with the war. I would get a call from somebody in Salt Lake. I don't know. It seemed like about every 2 weeks I'd get a call, and they're like, "We noted that you counted tithing, but you haven't deposited yet." And it's like, "Yeah, because it's a bank holiday on Monday here, and the banks aren't open. There's no in the rest of the world you can, or at least in the United States and in some countries, you can do night deposits. So tithing gets counted on Sunday, and the clerk or a member of the bishopric will take it right over to the bank, and they drop it right into the ATM machine, because there's a night deposit thing where you can just do that. And in Moldova, you can't. You have to meet with them in person, and you have to find them. You have to make it into the branch when it's open, and so like and I don't, for some reason during that time period, there was an inordinate number of holidays that were on Mondays. And so like we'd counted tithing, but then I couldn't deposit it on Sunday because there's no night deposit. And then Monday, the bank is closed. Um, and it's difficult also because my job, I couldn't leave until like 5 o'clock on Monday. So the bank is closed anyway. So I would have to go on Tuesday. And so I would get calls like all the time. It's like, well, you're going to deposit that money. It's like, yes, as soon as I can get to the bank, I still have a job. I still have to do my job. So, yes, soon as I can get to the bank. So that was
Um,
always fun.
I seem to remember one story where you had talked about somebody with their rice, like a member in their rice cooking from either Odessa or Kiev or something. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was uh, the new mission president. President Stratov was released, and President Shaban um, took over. And President Shaban shared with me he was what was happening is in Odessa, the Russians had targeted um, fuel stations and things like that, and so um, like natural gas. So the natural gas wasn't flowing in the city, so people couldn't cook on stoves anymore. They had to like build fires to cook food. And what they were doing is so people would go out and they would start a fire outside to cook rice or meat or whatever they were cooking, and then the Russians would target the smoke from those fires with drones and strike at people. And rice takes about 10 minutes to cook. And so one of the members goes out to cook his rice, and he starts a fire and he's cooking his rice, and then the shelling starts around him, so he has to put the fire out. And it had only been like 2.5 minutes, but his rice was fully cooked. Um, and so President Shaban talked about a lot of miracles like that, where people, rice cooked faster than it should have, and it was a miracle that they could put their fire out and still feed their family, and just things like that were happening. The Lord watches out for the members of the church.
I thought that story was super cool because it's kind of like there's miracles still today. You just have to be looking for
Yeah,
the right spot.
it was quite touching in the moment to hear that. Like we don't pay much attention to the attacks that go on there. Um, it's fallen out of the news cycle, but I have friends in Kiev and they're getting bombed all the time, and I'm constantly having to check up on my friends to see if they're okay, and it's rather disheartening.
I've also been muting myself because I'm getting back like
Um,
back feed from you somehow. Um, so you kind of had an interesting time as the branch president, and then what happened when you were released? Was it like the original branch president was called back, right? Can you explain a little bit like what happened there and maybe what happened like
well,
not what
I
happened with the branch president, but like you personally,
yeah,
like
I, I will say it was really difficult being the branch president in a country where I don't speak the language of most of the people that are there. They speak either Russian or Romanian, and it was difficult. And we would go out, and there was um, some very dear sisters that lived in the city of Orhe, were elderly. It was an elderly woman and her daughter, and both of both of their husbands had died, um, and one of them needed a blessing, and so it was it was it was a kindness that I was able to give her a blessing, and she was able to feel the relief of getting a priesthood blessing. But it was difficult in the sense that I couldn't speak her language, and so we had to try to record it and then get a translation of it so that she could at least get some of what had been said in the blessing. It was challenging, and having to do temple recommend interviews with a translator or with Google Translate. There was a lot of challenges that came with that. Um, and uh, so it was really difficult. There was a lot of challenges that went that way. One of the members that had been in leadership in Moldova in the past had some things going on with his family. He was not able to serve in the capacity of being um, branch president. But the after serving as branch president for 3 years, President Chiban released me as branch president, and the new branch president was put in, and his life was in a great spot, and he was able to like become the new branch president. And I served as the elders quorum president for a year under him, and and so that was all really good. And in a lot of ways, it kind of seemed like the 3 years that I was there, this brother was not able to serve as the branch president. And by the time he was able to serve again, I was no longer needed. And so I was there, finished up my tour there, and then got shipped out somewhere else. So it was kind of like I was called there to keep things afloat for a while. It was really good. We saw some great baptisms though. Some young men got baptized while I was there that were fantastic and are great members. And um, there was a lot of good spiritual experiences that happened for us in Moldova.
Did you I forgot to mention that your house was kind of like a halfway house for a while.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention that too, as we were talking about things that were happening in relation to the war. We had families that were leaving, fleeing from Ukraine because of the war, and so like just after the war had started, we got contacted by the sisters, and they were like, "We have this family coming in, and our houses are full. Do you have room to house these people?" And so we had an attic, like an upstairs, a third floor available. It was a like a big open space. Um, and and so we used that space because it had heating and lights and I mean, it was an actual functional room. And so we brought this family in, and they stayed for with us for about a week while they sorted things out. Um, and then they figured out their next move, and they were moving on to Switzerland, and they then packed up and left and went on their next step. Their son eventually was able to serve a mission in the Layton, Utah mission. So that was kind of cool to see that happen. But then we had a friend of ours that was teaching in Nigeria. Boko Haram started conflict there, and were targeting religious people. And so she had to leave Nigeria. And so she ended up living with us for 3 or 4 months in our attic room while she was teaching in Nigeria, during that time. And then we had another friend who stayed with us. Um, there was an incident that occurred at our school that created we had a long-term sub position that needed to be filled, and a friend had been visiting me, was able to actually fill that role. And so he lived with us for about 3 months and worked there. So realistically, during the 4 years that we lived in Moldova, um, we had a lot of people stay at our house, and the Lord kind of provided us with opportunities to help a lot of people who were in need. And
Uh,
then there was a couple that were just temporary things. Like we had a guy, this guy named Oliver, um, showed up. He had come from Odessa over and filled up a van full of food, and he needed a place to stay for the night. And so he stayed with us at our house and parked his van in our driveway. which is gated in. And then the next day joined us at church because it was Saturday night. And then he drove the food over to Odessa. So a couple things like that. A lot of fun stuff.
So, overall, just your whole time there as the branch president, what's any final thoughts or like spiritual messages you might have?
The Lord calls you to different places for reasons, and you got to figure out what it is the Lord has for you to do, and do it. I suppose we were able to help a lot of people and see a couple people get baptized, and you'll have to edit, I imagine, but I guess going back to what I was talking about with these refugees that came from Ukraine, it was miraculous because when they showed up, um, they looked horrible. They just looked panicked and scared and nervous, and they didn't know what to do, and they just looked so frightened and worn out. Like 17 hours to get through the border crossing alone. Um, and and they just didn't know what to do. And then they'd stay in our house for a day or so and got some good sleep, and there wasn't constant bombing going on. And we'd see them like the next day after they'd had that rest and some little peace, and and they were okay, and they looked like people again. And that first one also was the branch president of a branch in Odessa. And so I don't know. It was hard. It was hard seeing people come in that way. It was really gratifying to see them after they'd had a couple of days to sort things out and figure out their lives, and they left feeling a lot more comfortable about how things were.
Well, thank you for agreeing to share. I am gonna have to edit a bunch of this because I'm not sure when the call ended for you, but I think I missed a lot of one of those stories that I'm gonna have to just edit out probably the beginning snippet of one of those and cut in the other one that you'd started on. I don't That was kind of Zoom's fault, but um thanks for coming on my channel. And yeah, this has been a good conversation. I think people would like to kind of hear what it was like being a branch president, for not only one to temporarily fill in for this guy who was kind of not able to be the branch president for that time, and then secondly to be the branch president during the beginning of a war, um, in a country that's next to you. That sounds really really amazing and action packed and a really
Well,
eventful 3 years.
it wasn't as action packed as you might as it sounds.
Right.
But we did a lot of stuff, and we're pretty helpful. It was interesting, like when we were buying groceries. It's like there's four of us, and we'd come up to the check stand with like 8 baskets of like 8 grocery carts completely full, like sagging from how much weight was in them. we would go through the check stand, and
We're
it
having a
was pretty
large
crazy.
reunion this weekend.
Yeah. But actually, we ran into some other aid organizations that were doing similar things, so we weren't the only ones doing it.
Well, like the Salvation, like the Red Cross or Salvation Army, or well, like just any other.
No, there's in the first part of the war, there was just a lot of people that felt the call of, we got to go and help people in Ukraine, and they'd go over and they'd just get hooked up with whoever. And it's like, well, yeah, we need groceries. Go buy a van load of groceries and bring them here. And so they would. I don't know, crazy stuff.
All right, well, thank you for coming on.
Please like and subscribe.
Yeah, I've never said that before, I don't think, actually. I have
If you'd
25
like more
people
content
as
like
of
this,
recording.
please like and subscribe.
All right. Thanks for coming on. And for those of you who get something out of this, I hope this helped, and we'll see you guys next time.